The soft, early summer sunlight enveloped the quiet residential area in the suburbs of Boston. In my white house facing Commonwealth Avenue, I hurried with the morning preparations. The light streaming through the kitchen window shone intensely on the polished countertop. "Mom, is Dad coming to my game today?" Nathan asked, adjusting the collar of his uniform. His innocent eyes made me hesitate for a moment. Lately, Andrew, my husband, had been attending fewer of our son's baseball games. "Well, it seems Dad is busy," I replied vaguely, tucking sandwiches into his lunchbox. Nathan is 8 years old, but he's an incredibly kind and considerate child. More mature than you'd expect from a second grader. He's especially good at math and often receives praise from his teachers. On his baseball team, everyone loves him. Our mornings at home always start at 7. I prepare breakfast, and at 8 I take Nathan to school. After 9, I spend the day at my flower shop until 6. In the busier days, Andrew used to come home at 7 p.m. But lately, he's been arriving later and later. As I opened the shop blinds, I found myself remembering our first encounter 10 years ago. It was here that I met Andrew. He came to buy flowers for the opening of his twin brother James's hospital. An impeccable businessman in a perfectly ironed suit and a meticulous presence. I still remember the moment he smiled upon seeing the white Casablanca lilies and said, "My brother loves white flowers." 3 months later, we decided to get married. Back then, Andrew worked diligently as a promising partner at the prestigious accounting firm, McChee and Associates. The first 5 years of our marriage were incomparably happy. Nathan's birth further strengthened our bond. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, was delighted with our marriage. We always had family dinners on Sundays, enjoying wonderful moments in the company of James, who works as an emergency room doctor at Boston General Hospital. He adored his nephew as if he were his own son. Despite being twins, James and Andrew had opposite personalities. James was more expressive and familial, while Andrew was always meticulous, sometimes almost too rational. But everything began to change 6 months ago when Eleanor passed away. An invisible rift opened between the brothers over the inheritance, and family gatherings became less frequent. Andrew claimed work was overwhelming him, and he arrived home later and later each night. Even on holidays he worked more and family time drastically decreased. Our weekends also changed. He started missing Nathan's baseball games, something he would never have done before. Family meals became rare. Through all of this, only James continued attending Nathan's games with us, offering his unwavering support with his unfailing kindness. As I prepared to open the flower shop, I contemplated the colorful flowers arranged throughout the store. Ever since graduating from college, opening this business had been my dream. Using the meaning of flowers to help customers express their most precious feelings was my greatest pride. Suddenly I realized something. The days when Andrew would compliment me, saying my bouquets were magical, now seemed like distant memories. I felt something strange in him, as if he were only playing the role of a perfect husband and father on the surface. I had always known about his conceited personality and his taste for luxury, but lately those tendencies seemed to have intensified. The pure white petals of the Casablanca lilies displayed in the shop shimmered in the morning light. On Wednesdays, after shopping at Whole Foods Market, I stopped by the Boston Flower Market. It's an important routine for me. Seeing the fresh flowers always helps me feel at peace. While making cards with the meaning of each flower for Nathan, I think about how much he's grown. Lately, he's started remembering the names of the flowers, and occasionally helps me at the shop. Mrs. Wilson from Sacred Heart Church always praises his adorable way of attending to customers whenever she visits. Nathan attends Sunday school there and seems to enjoy himself immensely, surrounded by his friends. On Saturday mornings at baseball practice in Cold Spring Park, he's the first to grab his glove and start playing with James. Before, Andrew would join them too. Now, however, he always wears designer suits and never lets go of his cell phone. Even on holidays, he barely appears and rarely attends parent-teacher meetings at Ward Elementary School. I stopped looking at Commonwealth Avenue and let out a deep sigh. My wedding ring shimmered in the morning sun. Our story, which had begun with these flowers 10 years ago, was about to take a new turn. In the distance, the Boston College clock tower struck 8. At that moment, we had no way of knowing the terrible fate that awaited us. Yesterday was Saturday, Normally a day when we would watch Nathan's baseball game as a family. The sun shone brightly from early on, and a cool breeze swept across the grounds of Cold Spring Park. However, that morning, Andrew made an unusual announcement. He would cancel all weekend plans. "I'm sorry, I have to review some important documents today. I will definitely go to the next game." Nathan showed a slightly sad expression, but obediently replied, "Okay." Lately, he seemed to be learning to accept his father's absence. Seeing that broke my heart. Andrew shut himself in his study with documents all day. Although he had always been meticulous, that day he seemed especially nervous. He didn't let go of his cell phone for a moment, and from time to time I heard him speaking in a low voice to someone. He even refused lunch, saying he would eat later, and didn't open the door until evening. That night, worried about his behavior, I stood outside his study. From inside, I could hear his phone conversation. "Yes, everything is going well. I prepared everything perfectly for tomorrow." There was a coldness in his voice I'd never heard before in my husband. When I woke up this morning, the aroma of coffee wafted from the kitchen. To my surprise, Andrew was preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Kate." He smiled, his tone softer than usual. On the table were freshly baked croissants and scrambled eggs. It was as if yesterday's disconcerting behavior had never occurred. "I'll make a special dinner tonight. I haven't been able to spend much time with the family because of work." Nathan smiled excitedly upon hearing that. "Wow, Dad's cooking." After breakfast, I went to the flower shop as usual. With the change of season, I needed to update the arrangements in the store. While combining the vibrant colors of the hydrangeas, I couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. Around 2 p.m., I received a message from Andrew. "I'll be home at 7 tonight. Looking forward to it." A message that would normally have warmed my heart, but today felt strangely artificial. It was unusual for Andrew to say he would cook. In 10 years of marriage, he'd barely entered the kitchen a handful of times. At 6:30 p.m., I went to pick up Nathan. His after-school program at Ward Elementary had ended, and he was in a better mood than usual. He kept asking, "Mom, is Dad really going to cook?" When we arrived home, a warm light filtered from the living room. The chandelier glowed softly, and on the table was an expensive, unfamiliar tablecloth. The dishes we had recently bought at Pottery Barn were meticulously arranged. From the kitchen came the aroma of New England clam chowder. It also seemed that homemade bread was baking. However, why did this calculated perfection make me nervous? Andrew's behavior was strange. He moved the knife with unusual precision and checked the recipe from time to time. His expression seemed calm, but there was evident tension in his gestures. What worried me most was his insistence on checking the clock every 3 minutes. "It'll be ready in about 30 minutes, he said, picking up his cell phone again. For an instant, his expression tensed as he read a message on the screen. While helping Nathan with his homework, I couldn't help but observe Andrew's movements in the kitchen. The sound of the knife hitting the cutting board, the stirring of the pot with controlled movements, the adjusting of the oven temperature. Everything was too calculated, too careful. "Mom, Dad's chowder smells delicious," Nathan said with an innocent smile. At that instant, a chill ran down my spine. My intuition told me something terrible was hiding behind this overly perfect dinner. On the dining room table, candles flickered silently. The steam from Andrew's clam chowder floated in the air, creating an almost magical scene under the warm lighting. The homemade bread had a flawless golden color. The salad made with local vegetables was visually impressive. And yet, something wasn't right. "Please have a seat." There was a strange tension in Andrew's voice. The chowder was served in the expensive Pottery Barn bowls, looking as if it had come from a luxury restaurant. Why would my husband, who always kept away from the kitchen, prepare such an elaborate meal? That incongruity deeply unsettled me. "Wow, amazing. I can't believe Dad made this," Nathan said with an innocent smile as he sat down at the table. The old Boston clock struck 7:15 p.m. "Today is a special day after all," Andrew said with a smile. For a moment I saw a flicker of the kindness I remembered from him, the same kindness from when we met 10 years ago. However, something lurked behind that smile. My intuition warned me. I picked up the spoon and tasted the chowder. The salty, warm flavor spread in my mouth. It was definitely well made, skillfully prepared. But that perfection only increased my anxiety. Hey Dad, you really made this all by yourself? Yes, just following the recipe. Do you like it? The conversation seemed to flow naturally, but I noticed Andrew unconsciously touching his phone with his left hand. About 10 minutes passed since we started eating when I felt something was wrong. Nathan was the first to notice. Mom, I feel sick. His voice trembled. Right after that, a severe dizziness hit me. My vision began to distort, and I felt my limbs go numb. I tried to get up, but my knees gave way and I fell to the floor. Beside me, Nathan collapsed in the same manner. Dad, help me, my son pleaded, but Andrew didn't even move. He just observed us calmly. There wasn't a trace of warmth in his expression anymore. I was still conscious, but something in my gut told me to close my eyes and pretend to have lost consciousness. Nathan, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, imitated me. At that moment, Andrew's phone rang. Yes, it's done. Both will be gone soon. His tone was cold, as if he were making a work report. Yes, everything is going according to plan. Leave it to me. After hanging up, I heard his footsteps heading towards his study. Waiting for that moment, I whispered, Nathan, don't move. As soon as he entered, I opened my eyelids slightly and saw my son nod faintly. My intelligent boy was following my instructions to the letter. The second hand of the clock moved with cruel slowness. The car lights on Commonwealth Avenue occasionally shone through the windows. The bustle of the street sounded as always, and yet now it only increased the tension. We lay on the floor as if time had stopped. I felt Nathan's small body tremble slightly, but he was resisting with all his might. His bravery filled my eyes with tears. From the study, I could hear the sounds of paper going through a shredder. Amongst those noises, Andrew's voice filtered through the phone. Yes, they're not moving anymore. The effect is certain. A chill ran down my spine. My husband was watching us from afar. He didn't try to come closer to check on us. That at least played in our favor. Outside, night had completely fallen. The darkness deepened. On the dining room table, the candle continued burning silently, casting the shadows of a fallen mother and son on the wall, as if it could predict the tragedy that was about to happen. I felt my husband's cold gaze piercing my back from the entrance to the room. Holding my breath, I desperately tried to think why he had planned all this so carefully. Was it only for the inheritance, or was there another reason? Beside me, Nathan's small body trembled slightly. As a mother, I felt a mixture of pride and guilt. My 8-year-old son was maintaining his composure in an extreme situation. I saw a drop of sweat slide down his forehead. He must be fighting with all his might against fear. The air in the room became heavier and heavier. The food on the table had grown cold. What once symbolized our warm home had now become an instrument of poisoning. The shadows cast by the chandelier lamp created eerie patterns on the wall. The second hand of the clock ticked mercilessly, as if counting down the time we had left to live. Each time car headlights illuminated the window, I prayed for someone to come and help us. But the tranquility of this luxurious residential area would drown out any cry for help. Andrew's footsteps approached. I closed my eyelids tightly and regulated my breathing. He returned to the living room and stood there, observing us in silence. His presence loomed over us like a cold shadow. The man who once loved me had now become a god of death, awaiting our demise. Just a little longer, he murmured to himself. It was the voice of my husband, the man I had been married to for 10 years, and at the same time it seemed like the voice of a complete stranger. The distant bells of Boston College echoed in the night, adding a disquieting echo to this nightmare. From the floor, I focused all my attention on Andrew's movements. The sound of the shredder in his study was as if he were destroying our 10 years of memories. I heard drawers opening, papers being organized. It was clear what this meant. Andrew was hurrying to eliminate evidence. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 9 with a heavy sound, making all of this seem even more unreal. The streetlights projected our fallen shadows on the wall, elongated and unsettling. Mom! Nathan's whisper was barely a breath. With my eyes closed, I searched for his hand and squeezed it tightly. Quiet. Mom will protect you. My phone was still on the dining room table. The screen was off, but the recording app should have been running for the last few minutes. My husband's calls, the sound of the shredder. Everything should have been recorded. There was one last hope. Before dinner, when a sense of danger overcame me, I sent an emergency message to James, my brother-in-law. If I lose contact with you tonight, come to the house immediately. From the study came the sound of suitcase wheels sliding across the floor. Then the opening and closing of drawers. He was clearly packing. Amidst those noises, his voice continued with the phone calls. Yes, it will all be over soon. Tomorrow morning it will be resolved. There wasn't a trace of warmth in his tone. Beside me, Nathan trembled in small spasms. This was too much for an 8-year-old boy. And yet he was still obeying my instructions perfectly. Courage filled me with pride and a deep love. Suddenly the doorbell rang, slicing through the icy air like a knife. Andrew's movements in the study stopped abruptly. Then I heard hurried footsteps. The sound of his shoes coming down the stairs resonated louder than normal. Who could it be at this hour? What's going on? Why aren't you answering your phone? It was James's voice, and he wasn't alone. Several shadows were projected behind him. James? Why are you here? And who are these people? Andrew's voice sounded agitated, unable to hide his nervousness. I leaned on the floor to get up. We called them, I said firmly. Nathan stood up beside me, clinging to my arm. At the entrance, James was accompanied by 3 police officers. Kate. Nathan. James looked at us with concern. You're both pale. I saw Andrew's expression. I knew at that instant that his plan had been discovered from the beginning. I took my phone from the table. On the screen was the evidence of his crime. Suspicious purchases at Whole Foods Market, frequent calls with unknown numbers, and most importantly, everything that happened tonight recorded. It's all here, I said, showing the screen. From the sound of the poisoned food to your phone conversations. James stepped forward. Brother, your behavior has worried me for months. Your obsession with Mom's inheritance and your relationship with Sarah Collins. Wait, I can explain. At that moment, Andrew's phone rang. We all looked at the screen. Sarah Collins, his young assistant. In his call history, there were records of multiple conversations with her throughout the night. James looked at him coldly. We know everything. Your plan to move to Dubai with your lover. Using Mom's inheritance. James's words hit like a hammer. Andrew slumped his shoulders. In my mind, images of our life together flashed by. Memories of my flower shop, the business I so wanted to protect. Weekends playing baseball with our son. The promises made to his mother in her last days. Everything made sense now. Outside, police sirens approached, their sound breaking the tranquility of Commonwealth Avenue. From the Boston College clock tower, the bells struck 10. No one else would die tonight. In the distance, the bells of Sacred Heart Church chimed softly, as if announcing our salvation. Nathan clung to me. His small body still trembled, but his eyes reflected relief. Ma'am, we're going to need your statement, said one of the officers. I nodded slowly. The warm light of the living room lamp enveloped us, as if announcing a new beginning. James looked at us silently. In his eyes there was sadness but also love. He had always been the true guardian of our family. Mom would be proud, he murmured. His words broke something inside me. I couldn't hold back the tears. The family bonds that Eleanor had so valued were about to be reborn in a new way. The trees along Commonwealth Avenue whispered softly in the night. The cool breeze filtered through the streets. Meanwhile, at the Boston police station in the interrogation room, the truth finally came to light. Night was slowly falling outside. The streetlights on Commonwealth Avenue flickered with the gusting wind. In the next room, Nathan was receiving support from a child psychologist. Here are all the recordings, I said, handing my phone to the investigator. At that moment, Andrew's fate was sealed. They said he remained silent in the interrogation room, but there was already enough evidence. James explained everything with a somber expression. I first noticed it 3 months ago, he said quietly. It was during a routine checkup at the hospital. By chance, I overheard a suspicious conversation of Andrew's. Massive embezzlement of funds at the McChee & Associates accounting firm, an affair with his young assistant Sarah Collins, and a plan to move to Dubai. Andrew's gambling debts exceeded $1 million, further inflated by his obsession with luxury sports cars and designer goods. Eleanor's $50 million inheritance was his escape ticket. The events of that night had been under strict surveillance. After receiving my SOS message, James coordinated with the police. An emergency medical team was also ready in case things got out of control. The interrogation lasted until dawn. When it was over, we found temporary refuge at James's house. The following days were like living in the midst of a storm. The arrest of Andrew and Sarah shook the community, and when the embezzlement scandal at the firm came to light, the news spread rapidly in the media. Now, a month later, summer was beginning at Cold Spring Park. On the fresh, green lawn, Nathan played ball with James. Following our decision, Eleanor's inheritance would be donated to the Boston College Scholarship Program. We knew she had always had a deep interest in supporting education. The Sacred Heart Church community has warmly supported us. Nathan continues with his weekly therapy, and his therapist has given us good reports. His grades in school remain excellent, something that fills me with pride as his mother. Mom! Nathan ran towards me and sat by my side, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. He carefully held his baseball glove. Are you still afraid of Dad? His question took me by surprise. I remained silent for a moment, but seeing his clear, sincere eyes, I answered calmly, I'm not afraid because we have our true family, your Uncle James and Grandma watching over us from heaven. Today, as always, colorful flowers bloom in the flower shop. The white Casablanca lilies that once evoked sad memories have now become a symbol of hope. Next weekend will be an important game for Nathan's baseball team. As we watch him play from the stands, I'm sure Eleanor's sweet gaze will also be with us. Because sometimes family isn't just about blood. True bonds become stronger and deeper through trials. Our new story is just beginning.